Go ahead. Good evening. I would like to welcome all of you to the January 25th, 2021 council meeting of the City of Mayfield Heights. Due to COVID-19 public health emergency, this evening's meeting will be held via audio conference. Shanisha, may I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Ballistrea,
Present.
Mr. DeJohn,
Here.
Mrs. Finney,
Here.
Mr. Manno,
Here.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Here.
Mrs. Snyder,
Here.
Mrs. Teresi. Mrs. Teresi?
Gayle? Are you here, Gayle?
Gayle?
Did she sign in? Did you hear her sign in?
She was here 2 minutes or 3 minutes ago.
I don't have my phone. Someone want to call her?
Maybe sign in.
Also, just so you know, the live feed isn't working either.
Gayle Teresi.
Thank you.
Has left the conference.
She's going to call back in. Okay, so she's here. All right, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
States of America and to the republic
of the which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next is the approval of the minutes from our council meeting of January 11th, 2021. I hope everyone has had time to read the minutes over. Is there a motion to
Gayle
approve the
Teresi.
minutes?
is now in the conference.
Mrs. Gayle Teresi is present at this meeting. Thank
Is
you.
now in the conference.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Move, Finney.
Moved by Mr. Ballistrea, second by Mrs. Finney. Are there any suggested changes, amendments, or deletions to those minutes? Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you, Madam President. 2021-1-2, I requested for Mr. Murphy to read, not provide the changes. I'm requesting this out loud because I was on audio last week and it must have been misheard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sabetta. We will note the change. Are there any other further changes? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 These minutes have been approved. Next on the agenda is correspondence and announcements. At this time, does any member of council have any correspondence or announcements? The only announcement that I have is that this evening there are 3 ordinances, 2021-3, 4, and 5, pertaining to Section 121 on our agenda. I would like to recommend that we place them on first reading to further review. Since Mr. Ballistrea has introduced these, I will open up for discussion at the end of each ordinance. I will move to reports of officers, starting with the mayor.
Thank you, Madam President. Good evening, everyone. Just a couple things this evening. I'm sure everyone has noticed the work on Ranchland Summit and Eastwood. That's all gas line repairs. The project is scheduled for completion early April, and the restoration of trees will take place in July. Dominion sent letters to the residents notifying them of the construction project. The Wartco Construction was the awarded company, and they're working closely with the city engineer and the service department. Cuyahoga County and the United Way of Greater Cleveland's 211 Help Link announced that beginning today, dedicated staff will provide Cuyahoga County residents eligible for Phase 1B inoculations with information and resources they need to identify nearby COVID-19 vaccine providers. Nearly 90 providers, including hospitals, primary care physicians, and pharmacies, now offer vaccinations across the county to eligible individuals. So all you need to do is, if you're in that 1B portion or phase, I should say, all you need to do is dial 211. It puts you right into the United Way of Greater Cleveland. And I believe it's option 3 to get to the inoculation information. And the Staples store on Mayfield Road initiated a customer donation program. They donated, they compiled a lot of donations from residents and shoppers there to supply bags for elementary schools in our district, and we really did accumulate, they dropped off a lot of bags here that we took to the schools, and the schools are very appreciative. So we want to thank Staples and their management. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mayor. Are there any questions for the mayor this evening? Law Director, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no formal report, but I would like to note regarding 2 of the items on this agenda. The first one is 2021-06. I would request that that be placed on first reading because I have not heard affirmatively from the property owner that they want that property placed into the A5 or the U5 automotive district. So I would ask that that be placed on first reading. The second one I wanted to note was ordinance number 2021-08, and I can explain more when that comes up, but that's basically a housekeeping item to update the city's codified ordinances regarding all legislation that has been adopted up to December 31st, 2019. But if anybody has any questions, I'll answer those when that comes up for consideration. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Director of Finance, Mrs. Fagan.
Thank you. I have no formal report this evening either. I did want to mention to council, however, this evening before you have a copy of the exhibit for 2021-7. It was inadvertently not included in the packet that you received last week, but it is the exact same information that I emailed out to you last Monday. So you have had it to look over. So when we get to that, I will certainly entertain any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mrs. Fagan. Are there any questions? Next on our agenda are reports of committees, commissions, and boards, beginning with the Building Committee. Mrs. Teresi. Mrs. Teresi. Mrs. Teresi, are you there? Mrs. Teresi, are you there?
Gayle Teresi.
Has left the conference.
Moving to Finance and Audit Committee, Mr. Ballistrea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have no report this evening. The committee did not meet.
Thank you. Legislative Committee, Mrs. Finney.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have no report.
Public Works and Service Committee, Mr. DeJohn.
Thank you, Madam President. The Public Works and Service Committee did meet on, I believe, January 13th to discuss our 2020 sidewalk program and road program. I'm happy to say that
Is now in the conference.
we were in budget for 2020 on our sidewalk program. We completed 6 full streets and 2 partial streets. And it was recommended by the engineer for the 2021 sidewalk program to complete Elmwood, Maplewood, finish Oakville, Edgewood, Ridgeberry up to Lander, Temple, Longwood, Sunset, Washington, and we will not be doing the developments in the Marnell area because of that flooding problem. We want to see what is going to happen with that. So we hope to get as many streets in as we can for 2021. So we'll still come in hopefully around that $200,000 mark. Now, as for the 2021 road program, we're going to be putting it out for bid for Gates Mills Boulevard from Cedar to Sam Center Circle there. We will get a 50-50 match from the county, and I believe we do have that match money already. Is that, maybe if Mr. Gerson's on, he could let us know that, but I believe we do have that 50-50 match. That program will cost roughly around $500,000, so we'll hopefully get $250,000 matching funds. We're also going to be completing our Ashcroft road program, so all the streets, as Mr. Ballistrea calls them, the ABC streets in the Ashcroft area. So that'll be done, along as fixing the flooding problems along the curbs in that street. And finally, we'll have the Wharton Boulevard total reconstruction for 2021. So that probably should bring us to around $3 million for the year. We do have that money already budgeted, but we hope to add to this program, and we'll be meeting at the end of March to discuss, to see if we can get any further streets, including the Corporate Park by Parkland Boulevard and Parker Boulevard, maybe Eastwood and Golden Gate. But we'll see after we have a full year collection of our issue 9 monies. Also, at that meeting, we did table at the mayor's recommendation the Woodhawk project. And one side note about the sidewalk program, we will not be doing anything on Lander Road because there might be a trail going up Lander Road, so we don't want to duplicate our efforts by doing the sidewalks first and then coming back and having the trails put in. So that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. DeJohn. Mr. Gerson, are you with us this evening?
I am on the phone if you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Yes, just a quick description on the Gates Mills Boulevard. We applied for a 50-50 grant through the county, and we were awarded $250,000 to go towards that project. It's a 50-50, so as long as we spend $500, we would get $250 back. We estimate that project to be a little over $600,000, so we should be able to get the $250 back for the Gates Mills Boulevard project.
Sounds great. Are there any further questions for Mr. DeJohn or Mr. Gerson? Looks like we'll be making a lot of residents happy this year.
Thank you.
That's good, yeah. Okay, Public Recreation and Parks Committee, Mr. Manno.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Our next drive-up dinner on February 16th is sold out. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Highland Point Health and Rehab, Right at Home, Forest Hills Place, and Piccolo. Our next movie matinee at Eastgate Atlas Theater is scheduled for February 25th, featuring Knives Out with Jamie Lee Curtis and Don Johnson. Meditation by Governor's Village will have a session on Wednesday, February the 17th from noon to 1 p.m. The Recreation Department is working on details for summer camp and hope to have the summer 2021 plan out soon. Pre-registration is required for all programs. Please call the Recreation Department at 440-442-2627. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manno. Are there any questions? Please note there is a Parks and Recreation meeting tomorrow evening here in Council Chambers at 7 p.m. Safety and Transportation Committee, Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you, Madam President. I have no report, but I do have a couple emails from residents stating that they can see us but not hear us.
Okay.
If somebody wants to let them know back there.
Thank you. Mrs. Fagan will let them know. Thank you. Board of Zoning Appeals, Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you again, Madam President. Again, we did not meet. Our meeting was canceled. I have no report.
Thank you. Planning Commission, Mr. Ballistrea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Planning Commission did not meet, therefore I have no report.
Thank you, Mr. Ballistrea. Building Committee, Mrs. Teresi. That's okay. Building Committee, Mrs. Teresi. I know she has a report from the meeting the other day. Do you have anything, Mrs. Sabetta?
Oh, yes, I can state that we did have a meeting early Tuesday morning, 7:30 a.m., and present was Tom.
Gayle Teresi has left the conference.
Present was Tom Jameson. Also, Gayle Teresi Chair and myself. We did go over Tom Jameson's memo, and we are putting together recommendations on the one type of fence and also setback concerning side doors and chain link. So that is what they're working on now, and the recommendation was to put together a change in those types of work concerning the fence ordinance.
Perfect. Thank you. Mrs. Sabetta. Mrs. Teresi?
Oh, thank you, Madam Chairman. I know I was in the conference earlier. I don't know what happened.
So Mrs. Sabetta gave a report for building, but if you still have your report and you would like to speak on it, that's fine as well.
Well, if Mrs. Sabetta gave the report, we were both there in person at the meeting, and that's perfectly fine.
Thank you. Any questions for either of the chairpersons of the building committee? Okay. Next, we'll move to the comments or public portion. Due to COVID-19 crisis, the state of Ohio has established guidelines for public gatherings. In effort to keep residents, all members of public council, representatives, and other city employees safe during this time, the city of Mayfield Heights has closed the city council meetings to public attendance. Because public participation and transparency are important values of the city, residents are invited to call in and listen to the meeting via audio. Additionally, questions or comments may be submitted to council office by noon, Monday, January 25th. Mrs. Fagan, did you have any correspondence today?
I did not have anybody requesting to have correspondence read at the meeting. I did want to address, though, I did check, I guess we're having a slight YouTube issue with the audio. Our local channel feed is working, but the YouTube issue, it's on the YouTube side. So for those people that are trying to listen into the meeting and watch live at the same time.
Thank you. We will move to resolutions, and this evening there are no resolutions considered by council. Next on the agenda are ordinances. Ordinance number 2021-3, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance number 2021-03, an ordinance amending Chapter 121 of the Codified Ordinances of the City titled Council by amending Section 121.02J. First reading.
Is there a motion to place this on first reading?
Move.
Moved by Mr. DeJohn,
Second, Teresi.
second by Mrs. Teresi. Roll call on the motion to place on first reading.
Mr. Manno,
Yes.
Mr. Ballistrea,
No.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Ms. Sabetta,
Yes.
Ms. Teresi,
Yes.
Ms. Finney,
No.
Ms. Snyder.
Yes. Ordinance 2021-3 has been placed on first reading. I'm going to open up for discussion and let Mr. Ballistrea explain his introduction to this ordinance.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Everybody hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. The reason for the introduction of these ordinances is I went through our administrative code because there seemed to be some issues during the course of last year and some questions, and the whole intent was to try to clean up some of the language that's in our administrative code. That's Chapter 121. And the three ordinances, well, there was two introduced last meeting that council passed, and then these three pertain to some of the other changes. The first one, which we're discussing now, is 21-3. And one was item 4 on the first page, the limitation of debate. As you know, everyone has an opportunity to speak twice on a subject for 5 minutes. Then there was a question of a lot of people going back and forth with questions, and there was some semblance of disorder when questions were being posed back and forth. And the reason for the change is that when you ask a question, and this occurs at the state level and the federal level, you're yielding the floor. Now, on the city level, obviously, council should have an opportunity to ask questions. The government is run a little bit differently. But in doing so, if you're constantly asking a number of questions when you have the floor, this is giving the presiding officer, in other words, the president of the council, whoever is sitting in that place, the opportunity to ask the council member, are you yielding the floor, or would you like to continue with your statement? Because essentially you should be making a statement and not having a whole series of times of questions and answers. So that's just to keep the motion of the meeting going, so anybody doesn't jeopardize the meeting by asking, many questions at the same time and not giving another council member an opportunity to speak. Hopefully that makes that clear. The second one was we had some questions about the minutes. And the way it reads right now is the minutes, and I think it was mentioned by the law director and maybe even by the mayor, that contain a record of matters concerning actions taken, the vote, any questions that were asked, and the votes on those motions. That's what the minutes stipulate. And during the course of 2019, we've had minutes that were volumes of pages that I think could be really streamlined. And the change would be that I think the question came up whether some council members wanted their statements verbatim, and that should be allowed if the council member wants to add their statement to the minutes. But it shouldn't be arbitrarily word for word of everybody that says everything. Mr. DeJohn said, okay. Mr. Ballistrea said, well, maybe. That's verbatim, and that stuff is arbitrary and shouldn't be included in the minutes. But unless it's in the language that you have an opportunity to add your statement verbatim, you should have the opportunity to do that. But then again, it should be at the council president's discretion whether your statement is added into the minutes. That's the way other governments work. If you're saying something out of anger or something is said in jest, and that shouldn't be in the minutes, then the presiding officer has the opportunity to say, no, Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so, I'm not going to allow that to be added into the minutes. That's basically what that says. And Mr. Murphy, if you want to add anything else, basically, I think the minutes should be a synopsis, but still have an opportunity for people to add stuff verbatim if they want to. It's just to clean it up.
And then 21-5.
You want me to go on?
Well, we-
Why don't you?
Right. Mr. DeJohn.
So my question is does the chairperson and committee member have the option of including things in the minutes or extracting things out of the minutes?
Does the chairperson?
The committee chair or the the council committee, or council member to that committee.
Yeah, the committee meetings are addressed, Mr. DeJohn, in the other resolution, the other ordinance. You know, as to what you want to include as the chair, you have to sign off on those minutes. So yes, you can include or delete if you see fit.
So I guess what I'm saying is, so if the minutes come out, I see something missing, I can say, hey, add these back in.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike. Oh, Mr. Murphy, sorry.
Yes, I have nothing to add except to note that I do review and approve these as to form, and this form is proper if council wants to enact this change to its rules of debate.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Are there any further questions or comments? Ordinance number 2021-4, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance number 2021-04, an ordinance amending Chapter 121 of the Codified Ordinances of the City titled Council by amending Section 121.02L. First reading.
Is there a motion to place on first reading with discussion?
So moved. Teresi?
Moved by Mrs. Teresi, second by Mr. DeJohn. Roll call on the motion.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mrs. Finney,
No.
Mrs. Teresi,
Yes.
Mr. Ballistrea,
No.
Mr. Manno,
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Ordinance 2021-4 has now been placed on first reading. Mr. Ballistrea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This section of the codified ordinances in Chapter 121 of the Administrative Code refers to committees. And again, just to clean up some of the language that I know that we've had some issue with over 2019. Number 8, if you go down to the bottom of the page, it says when the joint committee is called, an assignment by the president of council to that effect upon such a motion of a council member. So the the council president is assigning the committee, and if you flip the page over, it says, then the president of council shall appoint either committee chairperson to chair such a joint meeting. We had question as to, well, who chairs the meeting? If a council meeting, if a committee meeting was called in joint session, and that should be, I believe, the council president's decision as to who chairs that meeting. If it's more relevant to legislative than building, then the legislative chair should chair, and vice versa. And then with regards to the minutes, in the last paragraph, of course, all committee meetings shall be open, a record of attendance, and a synopsis of the items discussed at that meeting, and any action taken by the committee shall promptly be prepared and signed by the chairperson prior to the next council meeting when it will be discussed. So the chairperson should have an opportunity to look at the minutes and approve them before they're sent out to council, before the next meeting. So that, maybe that answers your question, Mr. DeJohn, that, you know, the chair will have an opportunity to review them and make changes or edits or inclusions as he or she sees fit. Okay?
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Ballistrea? Ordinance number 2021-6.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance number 2021-05, an ordinance amending Chapter 121 of the Codified Ordinances of the City titled Council by enacting Section 121.02V. First reading.
Thank you. Is there a motion to place this ordinance on first reading with discussion?
Move.
Moved by
Move to
Mr.
Manno.
Moved by Mr. Manno, second by Mr. DeJohn. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Teresi,
First reading.
First reading, I'm sorry. Is there a motion to place on first reading?
Mrs. Teresi,
Roll call.
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mrs. Finney,
No.
Mr. Manno,
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mr. Ballistrea,
No.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Ordinance 2021-5 has been placed on first reading. Mr. Ballistrea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, this reintroduction of legislation is included in this chapter. It's always been council's practice, as long as I think I've been on, when something was defeated, that it couldn't be reintroduced at a subsequent or future council meeting unless the majority of the prevailing side agreed to such reintroduction. We've always practiced it that way, but we've never had anything in the code to state it that way. So in other words, if a piece of legislation is introduced and it's defeated, let's say, 5-2, then it cannot be reintroduced as that piece of legislation unless the prevailing side, the majority of the prevailing side, which would be the side that defeated it, 3 of those people decide that it's okay to reintroduce it. Now, something could be reintroduced if it's changed. Mr. Murphy, you can, chime in if I'm incorrect. If the wording is changed or similar legislation is introduced, then that can be considered new legislation. But once something is defeated, I had asked the law director, how often can somebody reintroduce something? And he said ad infinitum, so somebody could just keep reintroducing the same thing meeting after meeting if it was defeated, hoping to get somebody to change their mind. This way, it's in the code. If it's defeated, and it could only be reintroduced by the prevailing side. Is everybody clear on that?
Are there any questions for Mr. Ballistrea? Okay, thank you.
Thank you for allowing me
think
to
that helped.
explain those.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Ordinance number 2021-6, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance number 2021-06, an ordinance amending the zone map of the city of Mayfield Heights, Ohio, so as to rezone the property known as 6200 Mayfield Road, Mayfield Heights, Ohio, Cuyahoga County, permanent parcel numbers 863-05-059 and 863-07-133, from the current U4 Local Retail and Wholesale District to U5 Automotive District in the city of Mayfield Heights. First reading.
There is a recommendation by our law director to place this on first reading. At this time, do I have a motion?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Ballistrea, second by Mrs. Finney. Roll call on the motion to place this on first reading.
Mr. Ballistrea,
Yes.
Mrs. Finney,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi,
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mr. Manno,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Ordinance 2021-6 has been placed on first reading.
Madam Chair.
Mr.
If I may,
Ballistrea.
just a question for the law director. Mr. Murphy, you stated you were going to speak to the property owner about whether or not they wanted to agree to be in the U5 district.
Correct.
2 property owners, both automobile agencies.
The only one property that I've had contact with has been Mayor Ford through their attorney. And as council may know, they're a lessee on the property right now, but they've been, pushing for this change, and they were trying to buy the property, and the property hasn't gone through for sale yet. So I'd feel more comfortable having the current owner of the property concurring in the request that the property be rezoned to U5, and I haven't gotten that in writing yet. So
But the other automotive district in the city?
I haven't
No.
had any contact with them regarding that property.
Should we, before we vote on it?
No,
have
because
both districts?
this is only for the
6200 Mayfield?
Yes, this is for mayor, not Ganley.
Okay.
So if
I just wanted to
Ganley
clarify.
wants to be rezoned into U5, then they should contact the city and request that it be done.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Mr. DeJohn?
So last year in 2020, what did we vote on regarding this?
Last year, council voted to create a new zoning district, U5, and that went through Planning Commission and public hearing and council, and that was enacted. So there is a U5 district, but currently is no property in that U5 zoning district. It's up to council to move one or more properties into that zoning district. And that has not been done yet. There's been a public hearing on it, but council has not taken that step yet. That's what this would accomplish.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Are there any further questions or comments? Okay. Ordinance number 2021-7, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance number 2021-7, an ordinance revising ordinance 2021-31 for the current expenses and other expenditures of the City of Mayfield Heights, State of Ohio, for the fiscal year ending December 31, 2021, by including the open purchase orders as of December 31, 2020, and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Thank you. Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
So moved, Teresi.
Moved by Mrs. Teresi, second by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Finney,
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mr. Manno,
Yes.
Mr. Ballistrea,
Yes,
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
move.
Moved by
Manno.
Mr. Ballistrea, second by Mr. Manno. All members of council should have received the agenda summary. At this time, Mrs. Fagan, is there anything else you would like to add?
I think the explanation and the agenda summary spelled everything out for everyone. If anybody has any questions, I can certainly entertain them.
Are there any questions for Mrs. Fagan? Okay, roll call on the motion to adopt.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mr. Manno,
Yes.
Mr. Ballistrea,
Yes,
Mrs. Teresi,
Yes.
Mrs. Finney,
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Ordinance number 2021-7 has been approved. Moving to ordinance number 2021-8, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ordinance number 2021-08, an ordinance approving the editing and inclusion of certain ordinances as parts of the various component codes of the codified ordinances, providing for the adoption of new matter in the updated and revised codified ordinances, providing for the publication of such new matter, and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Move, Finney.
Moved by Mrs. Sabetta, second by Mrs. Finney. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Manno,
Yes.
Mr. Ballistrea,
yes,
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi,
Yes.
Mrs. Finney,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved
Moved
by Teresi.
Moved by Mrs. Teresi, second by Mr. Ballistrea. I'm going to direct this over to Mr. Murphy.
Thank you. In 2018 and 2019, council adopted several ordinances which are in the body of this ordinance, in which certain amendments to the codified ordinances were made. For example, 2019-6 amended 121.02. Also, the state legislature has made certain amendments to the codified ordinances by changing state law. By adopting this ordinance, council is directing the codifier, which is American Legal Publishing, to make those changes to the the two-volume book of codified ordinances so that those ordinances, those codified ordinances are correct. Council's already adopted these changes. It's just a matter of putting them into the book and online as well, since the ordinances are contained online. Questions?
Are there any questions or comments from council? Okay. Roll call on the motion to adopt.
Mr. DeJohn,
Yes.
Mrs. Finney,
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi,
Yes.
Mr. Ballistrea,
Yes.
Mr. Manno,
Yes.
Ms. Sabetta,
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder.
Yes. Ordinance 2021-08 has been approved. This evening, there are no motions to be considered by council, so we will move to new business comments from council. Is any member of Mr. Ballistrea?
Just a comment, I'd like to welcome the public finally, after many years of not being able to see our meetings and hear meetings. So I just would like to welcome the public to our first council meeting that we have on the air. So welcome, and feel free to contact any one of us with any questions.
Thank you. Mrs. Sabetta.
And with that, I'd like to welcome our new Deputy Clerk of Council, Shanisha Lloyd. Welcome,
Thank you.
and welcome, public.
Shanice, you're doing a great job. Are there any other comments from council?
Nope.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Sabetta, second by Mr. DeJohn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Thank you, everyone. We are now adjourned.
Bye, everyone.